Oh wait, do we have our first guest on? I think I'm frozen up again. Yes, we got our first guest, HanzOfHarkir. How's it going, man?
Howdy, howdy. How you do? How you been? It's like I like your hat. It's
I
nice.
appreciate it. Yeah, I got
So
my
it's
Grinch hat on. I got my Grinch shirt on. It says Merry Grinchmas on it. So it's uh
nice.
yeah, I got Hans. This is Kay. Kay, this is Hans.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
She's got her hat on too. You don't look very festivus.
I know. I'm really sorry. I have like my ugly sweater that I normally wear for the holidays for like all my like holiday and Christmas parties. But that's at home right now, and I actually am packing. I have like a big suitcase next to me because I actually am leaving to go home for the holidays in like in about 5 hours. So I'm just did some last minute packing, some cleaning for my apartment before I go see the folks. It's about a 12-hour drive. My roommate's coming with me, so we have plenty of like. It's not like I'm doing like a midnight drive by myself, but it's definitely not something I'm looking forward to. But yeah, that's why I'm all gross. I haven't cleaned up before I left, so I have my hat on. Like I haven't been able to get a haircut, right, because I been following COVID guidelines and stuff like that. So it's gotten way out of control. So I'm just trying to keep it all safe.
True. Well, tell us what do you think about this stimulus coming out right now? How great is that?
So obviously, stimulus is like some stimulus is better than no stimulus. Obviously, I would prefer like payments to be larger, both in terms of like the universal the universal income, like for people who are like underemployed, who like don't have employment right now, and for like the regular checks because like regular people are hurting. I think the largest issue we're going to be dealing with is that once the rent moratoriums are gone, the amount of money people have gotten from like the government is like unlikely to be able to cover like the massive gap that has happened because so many people have been under their incomes have been like below what they're used to since May. So you have a lot of people who have had several months that are it's going to be beyond their ability to pay as soon as the moratorium's gone. And I think in the current stimulus, I'm not sure if it's still like torpedoed because like Trump's like doing like the 2000 check thing. I mean, like, and we can talk about that in a second, but if that stimulus goes through, I think they push back the moratorium to February. But again, you're just kicking the can down the road, right? Like it was something like 14 million Americans could potentially face eviction or homelessness if that moratorium expires. And obviously $600 is nice, but it's not enough for to make sure like to pay back 6 months of rent. So we're gonna have a lot of people who could be homeless, but you might be able to buy a PS5. So like
True. Yeah, you could get a PS5. That's true. Yeah, there seems to be a lot of confusion back and forth as to which side is actually kind of pushing back against who gets more money and whatnot. From what I understand, the whole time it seemed as though Democrats were pushing for more money for the citizens, whereas Republicans were pushing for more money in like a bigger package because most of that was going to like big businesses and things like that. And then over time, they kept going back and forth, declining each other's bills and voting down each side. And each time the Republicans were saying like, no, we should do $600. The Democrats were saying like, no, we should do like $1,200 to $2,000, somewhere in there. And then they kept going back and forth until Democrats finally were like, okay, fine, $600. Like, let's just get something out there. And the Republicans were like, no, $1,200, take it or leave it. And like, it's
I understand the so obviously I haven't been like super like happy with how the Democrats have like done their sorts of stimulus. If I had to say like who I fault more with like the specific like instance of it, I would probably lay more feet at the blame of Republicans, where it's like you constantly have been fighting against these sort of checks, like with like very few exceptions, right? Like like I dislike Josh Hawley, but like on this specific issue, he's rock solid in terms of like wanting more checks, right? So it's not like a big issue for him specifically, but there have been like several senators on the Republican side. It's like what's his name, like Rob something, and he like constantly shot this down, right? So I think it's kind of hollow to say oh, we'll only pass this if you like lower direct checks or like the UI payments, and then suddenly like it gets on Trump's desk and he's like, I'm not signing this. Like the direct payments are enough. It's like, well, shithead, like you're the head of your party. Like, why didn't you say something? Like you could because I honestly think like Mitch McConnell has a lot of power, but I very much like don't think that he could possibly override both Democrats and Trump pushing for like $2,000 checks at the same time, right? Because like he has no base in terms of his party. If there was that kind of infighting, like the potential like Georgia primaries, which I hope Ossoff and Warnock win, but like they will be like absolutely lost, right? Like you have that massive fissure in the Republican Party. So again, like I think it's hollow. Like I'm happy we're having this conversation now. Like if we can do a clean, like up and down, like $2,000 like bill, like for like checks, and yeah, like that's totally fine. Like on top of the regular stimulus, I think there's been some like different like clipped like things. Like I saw like an interview with Amy Klobuchar where like she's like, where she definitely phrases it like really terribly. She was like, oh, like he's stopping, like aid for the American people. Because part of like what's in this stimulus, right? It's the COVID roll. It's like the vaccine rollout, right? So like if you block this bill, it suddenly blocks like, like the apparatus for like, distributing the vaccine. So she said that, but then other people were like, oh, she's saying because like it's the checks are too high. And again, like I very much hate Amy Klobuchar, but I don't think that was her intent. It was more like, hey, he's backstopping a bill that, has a bunch of other shit in it. Like, we can talk like at the end of the day about like all the different like weird shit that's in the bill, but like you can say like, hey, we still need the bill to be passed or some bill to be passed to like get that sort of stimulus out there. So like
it's all very confusing. It really is, because especially with the propaganda coming out from each side as to what they want versus what they're actually pushing for. It seems like.
I thought it was really funny. There's someone clipped tweets from Ossoff where it was like December 19th and he was like $1,200 checks now. And then like 3 days later, it's like $2,000 checks now. And like, you can look back in terms of, like precedent for this. Like you had progressive in Congress, like AOC and Rashida Tlaib and like Sanders, they were all like advocating for, $2,000 a month, like since the beginning of like the pandemic. Right. So like that's probably like where this 2,000 thing is like really, come from. And, if Trump's hopping on board for an ego trip or whatever it is, like, again, that's fine. I just like, it is quite funny, or at least I'm happy that this sort of game of chicken is about who can pay the American people more money. Like, like that's, I'm always like down for like, a dick measuring contest when like, the longer dick means better for everybody. Right. It's like, but that's a horrible analogy. Why did I even go with that? But I would just say, hopefully whatever like negotiations that end up happening, that it happens quickly, or that like, if they just have like, if they pass the regular stimulus and they have, what's it called? They have the regular stimulus and then just like, backstop like another $1,400 like after that, like it's totally fine. Like either or, like more checks, more money for more people. It's like, I don't think I'm getting any money because like, I think I was like still like on my parents' taxes because like I was in college, like when like the first like rollout like happened. So like, sucks for me, but like I'm doing fine right now. So it's not like I'm going to want to, but a lot of people, there's actually something that's really interesting. There's been a big issue with like college students, right? Of people who've graduated or who were on their the taxes of their parents because they hadn't had incomes. And like, they're actually going to be struggling immensely because they're not getting any of this stimulus, right? Because like they either were unemployed, like when the pandemic happened, so they've stayed unemployed, or like, that they were backstopped on their parents' taxes. So it means they're not getting any of like their specific UI. And that's why like, I think there's like a benefit, I would say, like at least like for, I saw one bill had like, it was like $500 per child, right? So like, I guess like, it's not, a full like stimulus check, but it's still much better for like, like families with multiple people. It's like, like $1,200 for me, great. Like, but if it's $1,200 for me and like, say like my roommate's like also like, single dude, but like, imagine like if we both had, also single dude, I have a girlfriend, but like, it's different. But like if you had like say children, right? Like if you had 3 kids and like getting the same amount of money as someone like with no kids, like, that sucks. Like, you got a lot of mouths to feed, like a lot of PS5s to buy, like for Christmas. I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot. Feel free to interrupt me.
Yeah, I mean, Kay, you got the last stimulus check. Was that helpful with you and your kids?
I mean, luckily, Matt was able to remain employed throughout this entire pandemic. He works for a company that makes toilet paper and other paper products, so he was considered essential throughout this entire pandemic. He didn't have to miss any work, thankfully. But yeah, it is helpful. I mean, the last stimulus check, me and my husband both got a stimulus check, and then we got a stimulus check for each of our children. And that is incredibly helpful. I think that the biggest problem, like the biggest hurdle that we're facing, honestly, with passing a stimulus bill is that we're trying to do too much in one bill. Just focus on getting relief to the American people. People are, losing their homes. They're not able to feed their families. They're not able to feed themselves. And we're trying to, pass a bill that has, foreign aid and let's pay everybody's college debts and let's provide funds for counterterrorism. I mean, why? Why are we doing this? 6,000 pages. We don't need 6,000 pages to get the American people the money that they need to not die.
You would think that they would do each one of these things separately as well. They would have something for the businesses, something for the American people, and then something separate for like foreign affairs. I know that one thing that a lot of my friends were upset about is that Pakistan is supposedly getting money for like gender studies or something like that, while Americans are getting $600 in the end. I know that this is upsetting for a lot of people.
Like $25 million allotted to like cleaning products and new furniture for the Capitol.
It's like, yeah, so I would say the cynical reason, and like what's likely the real reason, like why like they like smash all this shit together like so like unceremoniously, is because it won't, like, parts of it won't pass otherwise, right? Like there's no up and down vote for corporate liability shields that will pass the Senate. This happened like with the CARES Act, like the beginning, right? Like the whole beginning of this whole fucking thing. They were like, hey, we want, like specific like protections for, employers and like all sorts of stuff. And like they had a massive like Wall Street bailout tied to this. And so they essentially like, tied that to like initial checks, right? So I'd say like, the long and short of why we don't have like, say like a bunch of shorter bills is, one, it's like, it's a shit show, like just to get people voting anyway. But also like for a lot of the nasty stuff, you kind of have to like, it's like taking medicine. Like you have to soft it with things that like people actually need and or want. Otherwise it's not going to pass, right? Like that's like the cynical reason like as to why you would do that. So I would say specifically, like looking at like different checks. Like, so obviously other nations have done like considerably better in terms of like direct payments to people. Like you had like payroll protections. I would say if you look at in terms of like actual like per capita spending, the United States has like pumped out a lot of money in terms of like in terms of like quote unquote relief. The issue is like
we're third.
Yeah,
it's in per capita.
Yeah, it's like we just didn't like send it to the right people in the right places. Like, we didn't have like a payroll protection. Like it's like it's like having I think we talked about this like at the very beginning, right? Where it's like if you force everyone onto unemployment, like one, like state apparatuses aren't like equipped for that, but two, it means like when you want to start the economy again, like if things like start working like or like start functioning better, suddenly people can't get work again because like they've been on unemployment, right? So like, and now as things like are slowly like like coming back to life, it's going to take a long time, and like also like that does thing like go into like different factors where it's like, hey, like where did a lot of the stimulus money go, right? Like it went to like PPE loans for businesses that really didn't need them, and a lot of businesses that did need them didn't get them, right? So there's lots of like different stuff as like why it's not working the way it should. And like there's like different issues with the rollout, the response. I would say the foreign aid thing is like, I understand like why it's like somewhat frustrating, but I would definitely like say that that's not the biggest issue, right? It's like a lot. I think it's like if you add all the foreign aid together, it's like less than like $1 billion, right? And it's like, and that's out of like 900 billion, right? So like again, like it's like when people talk about like foreign aid spending in our federal budget, where it's like, yeah, I get it, like it's less than 1% of our federal budget, and like the United States has this clause like in the entire world, right? So it's like we have like all sorts of allies that we like send money to and like different shit to. So it's like I would say it's like something that can like definitely get people frustrated, but I would say it's like the argument where it's like don't like get frustrated at people who are like also suffering. It's like saying like, oh, why are we helping like addicts versus like people who are addicted to drugs as opposed to like people who can't afford prescription meds. It's like you can help both, right? Like in the case of foreign aid, we don't actually spend like a ton on foreign aid, but like apps like, but I understand like the frustration like of a case about like how like, hey, like why can't we like take care of like Americans too? So like obviously it's just like there's a certain amount of like a lack of political will and the amount of dog shit that they need to pass and the lack of standing for some people to fight. Like I would say that we'd be having a much different negotiation. Like if it's like actually 50-50 in Congress, right? Because at that point, you suddenly take away a ton of Mitch's power. So like, I'm like, if you haven't, if you're listening and like if you're like Democratic leaning, or you like, if you want like an actual like, debate in Congress, right? Support Warnock and Ossoff in Georgia, because then we'll have like 50-50. So like that actually like, leads to some like interesting discussions, right? So
right. Yeah, we've had a lot of conversations about that Senate race here on this show because I am in Georgia, and this has been pretty crazy as to, how things keep going up and down. The debates were so insane. Oh my goodness. Like, I don't think the Republicans could have looked worse. Oh my goodness. It's like,
you got a lot of it. If you're in Georgia, you got a lot of innate advantages, a lot of voter suppression. Like, so like, it's honestly like boggling, right? Like how like such horrible candidates like can do like so well. It's like I'm not a big fan of like Ossoff's style. and like Warnock has some like stuff in his past that are easily like utilized for attack ads, but like both of them are pretty like charismatic, like like strong candidates, and like they're against like absolute fucking bottom of the barrel idiots, and it's so sad. And like it's the fact that it's even competitive like boggles my mind, right? Like
yep.
So just but. I mean,
Warnock isn't the greatest candidate in the world, but he's going up against Loeffler.
I know.
She's so bad. She is just the worst candidate you could possibly imagine. So I know you're in a hurry. Before you go, talk to us a little bit about some of the voter suppression that's taken place and like what you know about it. Because I've had a lot of conversations with people about like IDs that are necessary or voter ID laws and stuff like that kind of we need to get rid of and things like that. So if you have a second, tell us what you think about like voter ID and other voter suppression laws.
Go for yeah, of course. So I would say like the most basic things is really twofold. So you have one, which is the identification laws, right? So in a lot of like ID things, you have certain IDs are acceptable and certain IDs are not, right? So if you want to disenfranchise certain types of people, you can look at who has certain types of IDs, right? And you can see this oftentimes where Republicans, like this is normally more Republican legislators who specifically like, say student IDs aren't allowed. It's like, oh shit, it turns out, like college age students, it's like 70-30, Democrat to conservative. So obviously like that's like a targeted reason of why you wouldn't want people with only forms of IDs like student IDs to not be voting, right? So that's like one thing is that you like, but like on the other side, I think this is something like in Texas where it's like they allow NRA ID cards to be used as voter. Like it's like, oh shit, like I wonder what the political makeup of the NRA is, right? It's like, oh shit. So like I would say like that's like the one side of things, and then you just make it harder for people to vote because obviously there's certain types of voting. Like if you have a driver's license, then you can like obviously like vote. But like again, it's a good amount of Americans do not have driver's licenses, and like we always make jokes about the VA is terrible. But like if I live like 40 miles away from the VA, from like the what's like the driver's thing, the
DMV.
Yeah, DOD. Thank you. I was like, DOD. It's like I will, how the hell am I supposed to go get like my license if I don't have a car and I can't drive and it's like 40 miles away from me because I live in rural Georgia, right? So like that's really shitty. I would say like the way to fix that obviously would just be like national voter registration, like instant registration at 18, right? Like if the idea is we want everyone to vote and we want everyone to vote safely, then to say, hey, everyone gets an automatically issued ID card and then like something that's valid, it's only for you. You can like tie it to your social security number or whatever like the fuck you want to say. And suddenly like, and you can say that's the only ID card that's accepted, right? Because if we're really like trying to like make it so like only Americans can vote, just have it make sure that's issued to every single American when they turn 18. Oh, suddenly like, all the worries about like voter fraud or like, people saying like, oh, they'll use like, like fake student IDs or driver's license, like, to vote, like suddenly that's not an issue anymore. So like there's a lot of ways you can fix it. And the reason they don't fix it is because it allows them, to keep using those sort of tactics. But then also just purging voter rolls. So like you have a lot of, this happened to like Stacey Abrams, like she spent a lot of time fighting this in like Georgia, is that you had people who voted and they're constantly taken off the rolls. And if you go to vote in the general and you've been taken off the rolls and you don't know that and you don't have same day registration, then like you're screwed. And Georgia does not have same day registration. So
they did this year, I believe.
It's like I thought it, and oh, okay. I thought I saw for Ossoff and Warnock for the one in January.
Yeah, not in the Senate race.
Yeah, not in the Senate race. So it's like, so again, right? Like it wouldn't be an issue if you had same day registration, but we don't. So again, like when we're talking about voter registration, it's not like someone's holding a gun to your head and saying you can't vote. It's like it's just putting like different roadblocks in place to make it harder for people to vote, like having a voting times that are only during the workday. And if you can't get off work, it's harder for you to vote. Like you have to pick up your kids from school, like all these sorts of things. Like if you just have, say, make it a Saturday, make it like multiple days of voting. Like obviously this country was pretty strained because we had like multiple days for waiting. But what if we just say had a 2-day voting process, right? Like where you have like where it was like mandated by law by your boss had to give you one of the days off
or a week.
Yeah, or a week. Like, like we don't like clearly we showed that like, it can take a little bit of time. Like obviously, like hopefully someone won't be like say like the entire thing is fraudulent the entire time. But like aside from that, right? Like it sounds like a pretty decent system. So but yeah, so those are the two things that are I'd say my biggest issues with voter voter disenfranchisement. I think if your strategy is based on making less people be able to vote, then I'd say that you probably have shit ideas and you cannot defend them, right? It's like if you think your ideas are applicable and like acceptable to like the majority of people, and you can get someone on your side by saying the things that you believe in, then you should probably want more people to vote, because then some more people voting means more people voting for you. So yeah, but thanks so much for having me. I hope we can talk more in the future. Again, like you caught me at a quite strange time tonight. I think my roommate was telling me he's going to sleep because he's number one driver. So
okay, tell everybody where they can find you.
Yeah, of course. You can find me at HanzOfHarkir on. Oh shit! 1 second. Sorry, something's like in my.
Sorry, we're playing you out, bro.
Oh, thanks. I was like, what's that music? I'm so sorry. Yeah, you can call me. You can find me at HanzOfHarkir on YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter. I do book reviews. I do live streams talking about the news. I have a couple conversations, debates every now and then. It's a good time. So check out my stuff. Thanks so much for having me, Tom, and hope you have a lovely Christmas, happy holidays, fantastic New Year, and we'll be in touch.
Appreciate you coming on, man. Have a good day.
Thanks for having me.
So that's my buddy HanzOfHarkir. If you guys haven't seen, he's come on the podcast before. You can go listen to his podcast episode. It's really good with where he talks about China and economics and stuff like that. He's got a great channel where he reviews books over there. Huge channel, lots of great content. Definitely go check him out. And up next, we can stay on the same topic, I suppose. I mean,